Welcome to Skybound Ops.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. This is Ralph with Skybound Ops, and today's episode is one that I've been looking forward to because it brings together something that we talk about all the time on this show. And it's, I think, the best way to put it is it's the intersection of operations, data, and real execution here in aviation. So joining me today is John Howe. He is the CEO of Valerex Aviation, a data-driven aviation leader who's built his career around turning complexity into clarity. And you're going to learn all about it in just a minute. There are so many things about John that I've been learning, and there are so many things that I'm looking to learn more about, and I'm very, very happy he's here. His story is unique, but again, all of our stories are unique, but this is one that I've been looking forward to. So in this episode, we're going to unpack what actually drives performance in aviation today, where companies are still guessing, where data is being wasted, and what it takes to build truly scalable operations. And we're going to learn a lot. So, John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ralph. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Like I said a minute ago, I've been looking forward to it. To everybody who's listening, I met John, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, let's say it, before he started his new venture. And then we sort of drifted apart, not drifted, we just went into two different directions. And then when he was ready to get started, he gave me a call. We went through all the things that we need to, and then we got started in working together. And I've learned a lot about John in that time, and that's one of the primary reasons I asked him to be here. John, like I said a minute ago, it's great to have you on. For everybody that's listening, you've built across aviation, consulting, global brands, and we'll talk about more of that in just a minute. When people hear your name, what do you want them to associate you with today?
I would like them to see me as a kind of visionary, because I like to think outside the box. I like to, take like you said, my career span has been very different to the majority of other people who've been in aviation their whole lives, which is generally, the rule of thumb. Everyone I speak to is like, yeah, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I don't have that. I've been in the industry for 3 years. But I've used kind of what I've learned from my past careers, and then try to implement those as strategies in an aviation industry that's kind of dominated by engineers. And I mean, it's necessary, because of all of the compliance and everything, and safety regulations and all the rest of it. So
Right.
I don't make light of that, but I want to be seen as a visionary in terms of the way that I look at things, hopefully from a different perspective to most. And I tried, like when we were chatting beforehand, I like to think outside the box. I like to build things that I don't believe are currently there.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, use data to drive that decision. So I don't make
You have to.
shots in the dark. So visionary would be, if I was called visionary, I'd be super excited.
That's awesome. It's funny, as you were saying that, I'm thinking in my head, I've been in this industry for 20 years, but almost 20 years. But 20 years ago, or I was in your shoes. I fell in half-assed backwards into aviation. The plan was to come in, do what I needed to, and get out. And all of a sudden, it's 20 years later. It's funny. As we were just talking about, you didn't start in aviation. Coca-Cola, Red Bull. What did those early years teach you about systems? What did they teach you about distribution and growth that still shows up in your work today?
Okay, so when you talk about systems, with big multinational companies like that, everything is system driven, and that helps you streamline, be able to report, and obviously, be more effective when it comes to, your communication with the customer and whatever, because you can talk about real data. So for me, systems are super important, hence why we actually met in the first place. That I did a lot of research around a lot of different ERPs, and what I liked about ERP.aero was the fact that it offered more scalable information that was specific to what I needed. as opposed to the standard ERPs that are out there. And they're all good. They all do a great job, but they just didn't have what I thought was what I needed for our company. So systems for me are super important. And what it taught me about distribution is a lot of what I did in both of those major blue chips. And I was also at SA Breweries, which, the big beer company.
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
right. I'm sorry.
no problem. A lot of what I did was route to market. So when you're working with big companies like that, their kind of route to market in a formal market environment is normally pretty much tied down, signed, sealed, delivered. There's not much you can do within that. You can always massage and make it better. And there's, like for example, nighttime deliveries and things like that. So there is stuff that you can do within that. But I think where I worked, where kind of we did the big route to market plans was on diving into the balance of the business. So like the informal market and what have you.
Right.
So that for me, I've tried to impose that kind of thinking in the people that work in Valerex. Is it's like, okay, we don't want to deal. I mean, let's be honest. The formal market in aviation is the big OEMs and the big airlines and stuff like that. Now, we've tried to do business with them, and we've got good relationships with a lot of people across a number of airlines. But the reality is that we're never going to have the scale to be able to operate. Not never, but in the here and now, we don't have the scale to operate where we can meet the complexities that they need. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So we shifted our focus to smaller operators, smaller MROs, other brokers. Because as you know, part of the reason why I wanted ERP was so that I'd have a system that could drive our ASA 100 certification, which we're in the process of getting. I actually had a meeting with our external
Awesome.
quality guy today, and I've lost my train of thought. But so from a route to market perspective, it's more about finding what the kind of niche that not everyone wants to sell a Boeing or an Airbus.
Of course.
Beautiful $30 million deal. You'll make, in my mind, you make a couple of $100,000 on that, and you trade responsibly. But as we know, if you deal with the multitude of brokers out there, they're trying to make $1 million, $2 million on one deal and be done with it. So I don't think that's where we. I mean, we're there. We'll get involved. We have customers who request those things, and we'll help them with that. But I believe that for us, it's about dealing more with the people, the secondary MRO, as opposed to the primary MRO that is like, for example, Turkish Technique or Lufthansa Technique or whatever it is. Those people have thousands of people that they send RFQs to on a daily basis, and it's going to be very difficult to compete in that space, especially when they're very OEM driven, and a lot of the time that they've got aircraft on programs and stuff like that. So it's not really. So if I relate that back to my old life, it's like, okay, so route to market in the formal market is sealed off. Supermarkets, we've got direct delivery, it's all good and fine. But in the informal market, how do you get to that market?
Right.
So you don't do direct delivery because you're going to be dropping one or two cases at each store, and that doesn't create the scale, and it isn't a self-funding exercise. So you find a third-party distributor. So for me, my third-party distributors are the smaller MROs that have customers that come in who are not the big
Correct.
players in the market. So that's kind of what I've applied from my previous life into the aviation industry.
It's funny that you mention that because in a very different way, I feel exactly what you just talked about. A couple of little stories, and then I'll move forward. So one thing that I don't remember ever saying out loud is I learned a lot from a cousin of mine who currently owns a big restaurant in Canada. But the reason I'm telling that story is because a long time ago, before he was starting out, he had no idea how to work that and make that work. So he started working for a big box fast food chain to learn the distribution, to learn the way things happen, to learn how do you deal with customers. And then that set him on the right track in order to be able to eventually get to the success that he's had today. And then on the other hand, a personal story, again, it's a different set of circumstances, but for me, it was the same lesson that you talked about a long time ago in a previous life. You know, I wanted everything and I wanted it now, right? You know, that's before I grew up. And then I used to chase what we used to call a whale. All I wanted was that whale because the whale was what's going to get me what I wanted to get. And I was lucky enough, the point of the story is I was lucky enough to have had two mentors at the time that taught me how to reset that, because the example that they use with me is so silly that it sticks with me today, and I use it with other people. If I'm walking down the street looking for $100 bills, do I pass the $5 bill, the $10 bill, and the $20 bill on my way down because the 100 might be around the corner? Or do I pick those up and then still pursue the 100? And that's, I don't know how. I haven't thought about that in a while, but a lot of what you just talked about got me to think about those two things in the middle of it all. It's funny how life teaches you, but for what it's worth, that's a very long way of saying that I agree with everything that you just talked about. So
Awesome.
so walk me through the shift into aviation. So you're sitting there with SAB or Coke or Red Bull, and then one day you decided you wanted to make a move. So walk me through the shift into aviation. What was it that pulled you in? I guess that's the biggest question. And what did you immediately realize was broken, which I think you already covered a little bit, was broken or underserved in this industry?
Okay, so first of all, you know, necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So when COVID came around, I'd moved on to a smaller South African brand called Twizzler.
Okay.
And when COVID hit, they retrenched 70% of the front end. And you know, it was kind of last in, first out scenario. So unfortunately, I was impacted. And then we all know what happened in COVID. Everyone put on freeze, you know, like employment
Oh yeah.
freezes and what have you. And then I'm over 50, right? So the reality is that there's a very narrowing kind of pool for people over the age of 50 in the job market. And in South Africa with equity employment, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I started to do just general trading. And through trading, I kind of got noticed, and someone said to me, have you ever thought about the aviation industry? And I said, I mean, I love airplanes. I love to go in them. I love to go on holiday, right? So yeah, that's what I thought about. So they said, well, you know, have you ever thought of buying and selling parts? And I said, no, I haven't. And they gave me a big story about, you know, this big mushroom of money that you can make, you know, this atomic explosion. You feel one explosion and there's this huge mushroom of cash that falls into your lap.
Yeah, I've heard the story.
And yeah, I started with them. Nice company, had a really good, you know, had a really good experience, learned a lot. Then went through another company, and eventually I was like, okay, so the reason why I left the first one is I kept saying there's no strategic intent. What we call in South Africa a smos is someone who will buy something, he'll go to a kind of scrapyard, buy something, polish it up and sell it. That's what we call a smos. And I never wanted to be that smos, that hardcore aviation broker, which we all are. You know, there's no harm in being a broker, but I wanted more strategic intent. So eventually, after trying to do it in two other companies, I was like, you know what, why am I doing this for other people? Let me do it for myself, because no one was buying into what I really wanted to do, you know, because my vision wasn't their plan to start with. So, you know, I sat here at home the one night and I thought, you know, how difficult is it? Fair enough, everyone likes to have a company that's registered in the US to deal with, but if I give enough value and I offer enough, you know, stability and all the rest of it, and have enough credibility, there's no reason why they wouldn't deal with me in South Africa. Because there's always a perception of Africa, right? So, I embarked on that journey. So for me, it was from the get-go, ASA 100 was very high on my priority list because that gives you a level of credibility. And then it was about, for me, was creating those strategic partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about finding a part, selling a part. It's about having partners, understanding what their business model is, trying to get as many suppliers that service them to get what we need from. So it was a very kind of targeted approach as opposed to a shotgun approach. It was like find the customer, know what their needs are, find their needs more effectively. So
Right.
very lucky that I have a really good team. I have an engineer, John from Turkey, and I have a procurement guy who's originally from India, but he's kind of based in Dubai and in
Mm-hmm.
Latvia at the moment. So between the three of us is we have a much more kind of collaborative model where we speak a lot more about how best to service the customer as opposed to just finding parts. I mean,
Right.
we were talking about AI, right? I can do an AI search and it'll spit out 100 different suppliers, but are they specific to what that customer needs? You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
So I think I'm being a bit,
No, you're good.
verbose. I'm being a bit verbose, but to all intents and purposes, it's just, for me, it was about, finding a niche and then making that happen. So that was kind of my transition from my previous life into my new life. And I unpacked a little bit in the last question in terms of, instead of focusing on the existing market, it's about, going for where I believe the value is.
Correct.
And then that's the target and the journey that we went on. So that's in the long and the short, my journey from previous corporate life into
Well,
aviation.
it makes a lot of sense. And what I heard you say is also something else that I believe in. That there are two ways of doing something. One, you do it and you see what happens. The other one, you do it with a purpose and reap in some of the rewards. And I think that's the track that you're under. And I've been lucky enough to be in a position to agree with that because that's the path that I think makes the most sense. And that's the path that takes you to where you need to go. And then in those conversations that you talked about, like before we started recording and then before now, we've talked a lot about data and data-driven aviation. For example, quote to cash, turnaround, margin control. All of those things speak of operations, but I wanted to ask you, especially based on what you just said, what does operational clarity look like actually inside a high-functioning business? In your words.
Look, and I mean, I think you just spoken to the big buckets. So for me, there's a couple of kind of key deliverables when it comes to measuring what my people do. So we get an RFQ. Number one kind of metric that comes out of that is speed to quote.
Yep.
Because if you're taking weeks to quote, that RFQ is already cancelled and you're wasting your time. So
Done.
if you aren't getting the speed to quote and it's a super hard to find part, which is a reality in aviation, it's about ensuring that you keep the line of communication open with you and the customer. So it's
Correct.
not just leaving that a blank space. It's about calling the customer every second day and saying, listen, I understand it is a hard to find part. We've checked with the OEMs, we've checked, off market. But please understand we're still looking for it. And 9 times out of 10, they're finding the same issue with other suppliers as well.
Correct.
So that's the second thing, or the third thing is communication. Then for me, a big metric is what is our transition from quote to PO. Okay. And that generally from what I've experienced is driven a lot by customer service and the trust that someone will have in you. It's like customer service and trust will give you a leeway of 10% in my mind when it comes to price. We've been often 10% more expensive than someone else, and we've still gotten the order and done the deal. Again, then when the PO comes through, there's the next step in communication in terms of making sure that you're communicating with the customer all the way through the delivery process to make sure that that happens smoothly, the part gets delivered. Now, we all know in aviation, SV parts have a high rate of failure on installation. So again, I have a customer who actually wrote me a really nice message to say the difference between us and anyone else is that when we had a part that failed installation and it was sent back to the MRO, we gave them daily feedback, even if it was just no new update. We are in touch with the MRO. They're still projecting it by the 6th or whatever the case is. And he said that communication
goes a long way.
Absolutely. And that was, so for me, and that's part of the customer service journey that I want Valerex to take. It's not everyone, and with all due respect to them, that's not in a engineer's wheelhouse. It's not their kind of key deliverable. They want data. They want to give you the data and move on, and let's not waste time on the nitty-gritty and how are you and how are the kids and all the rest of it, which is what we bring to the table.
Correct.
We've got the engineers. They're there. We have them. But it's more about, becoming the guy that, when you're out hammered at 2:00 in the morning. Never happened to me, by the
way. Yeah, me neither.
And you've got no one to call. We want to be the guy that you call and say, come fetch me.
Yep.
From a business perspective, right? So you're hammered. It's 2:00 in the morning. What do? We call Valerex. That's what I try and get my people's kind of ethos to be about, is be the guy that you'll turn to when the chips are down.
You know what? You can't, I don't know. Maybe you'll agree with me. Maybe you won't agree with me, but I think that's something more than admirable. I don't think it's something that you can teach most. You can teach some, but I don't think you can teach most, because I've dealt with people on both sides of that argument. I've dealt with people that make me feel like I'm one of the pack, that I always know where my money is going to go, where my service is, what is it that I'm waiting for. And then I've dealt with other people or companies that basically say, we're going to do the job. We'll let you know when it's done. Don't call us. I mean, they don't come out and say, don't call us, but they might as well come out and say, don't call us. And I know the feeling that I walk away with when I deal with A or when I deal with B. And again, it doesn't matter, because a lot of these businesses have been around forever. So if vendor B was willing to change along their line, they would have changed, but they don't. So I think that's very, very admirable. And for what it's worth, I agree with it. And I think it helps you. I think it helps you in a lot of ways, and sort of leading into the next thing that I wanted to ask you. So you've scaled assets or asset trading across engines, across APUs, landing gear. Other than what we just talked about, what separates companies that scale predictably versus those that stay reactive? And it might be the same answer. I don't know, but I wanted to ask you.
Look, I think the big companies, when it comes to assets, no one is going to be able to scale like GA Telesis, AJ Walters. They have the critical mass to scale things in a different level, especially when it comes to assets. So for me, scalability is not in the major part of the business. Yes, we're there. Yes, we do the business. Yes, we offer stuff to customers on a regular basis. But the reality in that environment, even with the likes of GA Telesis and all the rest of them, is they're not striking, from what I understand from the research that I've done, their strike rate from request to sale is around between 15 and 20%. So it's not like they're closing every deal that they get.
Correct.
So when it's for me, it's more about, so it's not about scalability, it's about trustability, right? So one of the things that we do is there's a multitude of brokers in the market with multiple, and I mean, I don't have anything against them. I'm not bad mouthing them, but there are a lot of people that have an unrealistic expectation when it comes to commission levels. So we play open cards. If a broker offers us something, we give them a commission agreement. We say to them that we'll keep you whole responsibly. But at the end of the day, if we don't have contact with the actual owner of the asset, we're not interested in going forward with the deal. And it's fine. A lot of them get pissed off and they scream and shout at us and we think we're arrogant. And it's not about arrogance. It's about, I don't want to go to my customer with, excuse the terminology, with bullshit,
Correct.
because there's a lot of that in our industry. I want to go with facts. So, redacted mini packs and the like. That doesn't help me, it doesn't help the customer, and it doesn't build any trust.
That's a
The
big one.
Yeah. So I mean, all of the associations I've joined and all the rest of it, they're kind of like, for example, GLADA, for aircraft trading. They consistently push on responsibility. They have a training program. You actually commented on it the other day, and that goes through the whole time during that training process. Yes, I didn't learn a lot of new things. I know and understand how to do the deal and all the rest of it. I understand all of that, and I understand the inspections and all the rest of it. But what it did do for me is it continually drives the point that compliance is key, number one. And number two is about doing it in a measurable way that you track and measure, right? So it's not just about, okay, well, we'll offer you this and that and the next thing. It's about being involved
Correct.
in all the different things. So I spoke about strategic partnerships. One of our strategic partnerships is with a company called Avtrac, very well-known camo company globally. And we can offer, so through our strategic or our joint venture partnership, is we can offer inspections and what have you under the auspices of Avtrac. We have a share split agreement in the back end, so there's no price increase or anything like that. It's about so for us, that's a service. So if we're selling an engine, selling an airplane, whatever the case is, and you don't have someone to do your inspections, then we can offer that service. So it's an additional service that we offer. So you want to buy an aircraft, we'll do the inspection. The difference being is that if we're offering you the inspection, we'll do it with your eyes in mind. If a person is selling an aircraft, their inspection and the report that they give will be based on telling the best story about the aircraft. Everyone would do that. No, it's no different to anything else. If you want to buy a car, they're going to tell you all the good stuff about the car. They're not going to tell you the bad stuff, right? So I mean, it's the same. So it's just that, for me, and that goes back to the trust story, NBAA, the fact that we're pressing hard, we're members of ASA, and we're in the, like I said a couple of times, we're in the process of getting compliant. So, those build trust.
They do.
But they come with responsibility. If you do something and it isn't done properly, we're gonna fail our next audit, and we're not gonna have the unless we can remedially fix it, we'll lose our certification. So for me, it's I know I'm being verbose again. It's my thing.
That's all. Yeah, I'm following you. I mean, you're talking a lot about that trustability that you mentioned a minute ago, and I think that's central.
So for me, that's yeah. If you want to build a relationship, I mean, if you're in a marriage, right, and you have trust, the marriage goes particularly well.
Correct.
If you don't have trust and there's
it doesn't go well,
fear of some kind of interaction that isn't right, you lose that trust, you lose the trust, you lose the customer. So for us, it's building strong relationships founded in trust or embedded in trust.
100%. Listen, I mean, I agree with you. Like I said a minute ago, this is about that trust or trustability. That's what leads to commitment. That's what leads to a retention. That's what leads to back to the trust that you're talking about. And it's a lesson that I learned, that I continue to learn every single day, just like what you're talking about. And one of the things that I think you touched on, but didn't get into, the way that I would put it is, I go to bed every single night and I can sleep very, very well because I can see you tomorrow and not have to remember what I said to you yesterday. And that carries me forward again. And then I repeat that lesson tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And then all of a sudden it's 20 years later, we're still doing business. We still like each other. We still talk to each other. And that's not something that I think you can teach. You either do it or or you don't. And if you don't do it, you suffer consequences. And when you do, it's not always good, but there are the rewards that sort of come up. And that's actually a good segue into what I wanted to talk to you about next. So you've built before and now you've built teams across industries. I think you've already talked about it a little bit, if I'm being honest, but what is your philosophy on performance, accountability, and building operators, not just employees? And I do think you touched on that a minute ago. I just wanted to get back to it.
Yeah, I think that, part of what I did when I was at Coca-Cola was I did a stint in learning and development. I was seconded to learning and development from operations. So I learned an immense amount. First of all, adults don't learn via rote learning. They just don't. I'll give you a book to read. You'll learn zero. You'll take out the stories from the book because you could experience them in your mind, but you won't learn anything. So the only way that people learn is by physically doing it and bumping their heads.
Yep.
So yes, every time I've looked at bringing someone new onto the team, it's not necessarily about their skills base, but it's about their approach to life. They're kind of, and I mean, you can pick up in a conversation the kind of people that you're dealing with. I mean, I did a lot of work on personality typing when I was in learning and development, and every personality type wants to be communicated with in a different way.
Correct.
So those are things that I take into consideration when I speak to people. So, like for example, John, he's our general manager in Turkey. Super credible guy, super well qualified engineer, and it's been difficult for him to grasp certain concepts of stuff that I've given him. And it's, as long as you're trying, I don't mind. Like I tell the team, I mean, our motto is be brave, be bold. So I tell the team, don't be scared to fail. If you fail, I'll help you fix it. But have the cojones to stand up and be counted, make a decision.
Correct.
So those are, and it's easier said than done. So a lot of people kind of, one of the things that, and I mentioned it already. So for me, relationships don't happen in one phone call.
No.
They don't happen in 2 phone calls. They happen over an extended period of communication. You can get a bite and have a likable feeling towards someone, but you'll only build the relationship over repetitive communication and having a similar message and making sure that that you continually telling. The first thing that you said was that you can go to sleep at night and put your head on the pillow and sleep, because in essence, what you were saying is I didn't bullshit anyone and I have to remember the bullshit that I spoke about, right?
Correct.
Excuse my language.
No,
but
it's you're spot on. I mean, I did when I was 18, but then I eventually grew up.
100%. And that's what, so going back to the kind of learning process is that John, in his engineer thinking way, thought, send an email, let the email be professional, and I'll get the responses. And now John is, regularly going for coffee with his customers, regular phoning them, asking them, their Fenerbahce supporters in Turkey. So it's about, how did our team do this weekend? Blah, 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 this, that, the next thing, the manager, the player, how it goes when you support a team. So that builds the friendship, and then the consistency of communication builds the business relationship. So
Correct.
That is something he didn't get for a long time. And John's been with me since John's followed me wherever I've gone. He's super loyal, and he's a super human being, a really nice guy. But he's just had to learn the nuance of building relationships.
Right.
Now, currently, his way of dealing with things is much different to a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago is if you send 5,000 emails, you'll get 200 responses, and let's do that. AI can do that. I don't want to fall into that spam AI crap that you get on a daily basis. We all get them. We all get LinkedIn messages.
Oh yeah.
And that's fine. I suppose there's a space for that. But for me, it's not genuine. You know, it's not, you're not speaking to a person. An AI is generating a message for you, and they're just sending it to you. There's no heart, there's no soul in
Correct.
that communication. So do I read them? Yes. Do I connect with them? No. You know, because it's just more of the same stuff in this automated queue that they send people. So the thing, and I mean, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, it's about knowing your customer. So
It
before
is.
you even contact that customer, do some research. Find out
Correct.
what aircraft they look after. Find out what, what type of work they do. No one does everything from an MRO perspective. No one does everything on an aircraft. Do they do C checks? Do they do line maintenance? Are they an engine shop? Are they specifically focused on APUs? Understand what it is, understand what they use, what models they use, and when you contact them, hopefully at least by a phone call, is you say, yeah, we see that you guys are very focused on, 777 APUs. Understand we have this network, we built this up over a period of time, and we would like to be able to service you more effectively. That gives them a sense that you understand their business, as
Correct.
opposed to the
100%.
AI generated, we do this, blah, blah, blah. We'd love to set up a meeting and find some synergy. I think people are so tired of hearing the word synergy that if you
I've
do a
been tired.
word
I've
search,
been tired of that word synergy for 6 years, longer than 6 years. I don't know what it is about synergy, but I hate that word.
look, the concept is really good.
It
Synergy
is.
work, the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I
Correct.
believe in that, absolutely. And we try and live in a synergistic state. But if you're communicating with me and telling me, well, let's find synergies between our businesses, thank you for your AI message, delete, move on.
I know exactly what you mean. It's we get them all day long. Listen, I think, and not in a roundabout way, in a very, very crucial way, you answered that question perfectly, because what you talked about is that human condition. It's the ability to adapt and learn. I think the example that you used with John sort of talked about that if I give you a book, you're not going to learn from it, but if you go out and practice and bump your head, you actually will. And that's the biggest part, going back, in my opinion, for what it's worth, going back to that question about building operators versus employees, that's the biggest part. I think an employee will never listen. I think an employee will just do what they're told. But when you're building that team, the operators, the people that will be with you, the people that will follow you company to company, the people that will learn from you and continue to grow, that's the difference. That's where you get that trust again, that word again, and that's where you get that commitment. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. Let me
And you mentioned the trust again, and it's something I believe in as a leader.
mhm,
If I want my people to give out trust and be trustworthy to the market, they must feel that from me.
correct.
So no, there's no question too small. There's no problem too big.
Correct.
Those are the kind of things that, so that trust goes both ways.
It does. Listen, I mean, it reminds me, unrelated to this, but two things I've always said to my teams when it was a small company, when it was a large company, my door is always open, number one. And for what it's worth, a combination of what we just talked about, if you think the grass is greener on the other side, you should water your own side before you open your mouth. And that goes a long way. So let me sort of switch gears for a little bit as we start to wind down. Lightning round. Just pick one real quick. Engines versus components.
Components,
Speed versus margin.
speed.
Data versus instinct.
Sorry, say that again.
Data versus instinct.
Data.
All day
But
long.
instinct is important as well.
100%.
Data drives the decision. Make a data-based decision. Use your instinct as how to deal with the customer.
100%. And that's where those life lessons come in. And that's where your ability to trust also comes in. I agree with that 100%. Almost last thing, where do you see aviation supply chain going in the next 3 to 5 years? And more importantly, where can people connect with you or follow your work?
Okay, so first of all, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. either through our Valerex site there or through me, John Howe. I don't know the URL, so I apologize. But
It's okay.
we also have a website, www.valerexaviation.com. Valerex is Valerex. Sorry, what was the question you asked before? My contact details?
The one before that was, where do you see aviation supply chain going in the next 3 to 5 years?
It's something that, to be honest with you, it's something that I do a lot of research on. And I think that, you know, the power and stability of the OEMs is important. And I think that the fact that I think there is limited scalability in their environment, you know, just purely based on, you know, let's take what happened in COVID, right? So COVID, all of the OEMs were at the height of their productivity and all the rest of it. COVID happened, and all of a sudden you had this empty void from a customer perspective. So they scaled back a lot of operations. Operationally, hugely important because they needed to stay profitable in order to stay open. The problem is it's when COVID disappeared, we didn't go back slowly to status quo. We went from zero back to status quo
overnight.
And so there's a massive gap, and everyone knows it. It's not a secret in the industry that there's a massive OEM gap.
There is.
So I think the market will continue to need both sides of that equation. So the OEMs will always play a really important part in our industry. You know, they've built their reputation over an extended history, and they are where they are because of the professionalism and what they offer their customers. And that's important, and I think that will grow on its own, and that's fine. That's an important part. But I think that the off-market parts sales, I think, is going to grow. I think the fact that there is a much higher focus on being certified, whether it be through ASA or through ISO or whatever the case is. I think that that's going to be more important. So, and I think that it is the right thing to do, and I think that it will weed out the fly-by-nights and the guys who are looking for a big paycheck. But I think that space, as long as it's done responsibly, I think that will grow exponentially. I think that consistently will grow. And I think that those partnerships that you build between the likes of MROs and what have you will be huge in making sure that the aviation industry can continue to expand at the level that it's expanding with. And then obviously the big thing from a responsibility perspective is, you know, let's make sure that we're reducing our carbon footprint. Let's
100%.
Let's make sure we're doing it, but do it responsibly. You know, it's not about just doing a standard, you know, across the board kind of mandated thing. It's about understanding what the complexities are and making sure that we work towards a greener future for our kids, their kids, and so on and so forth.
And so on.
Yeah, so I think that's where the future lies.
The only thing, if I may, just take 30 more seconds, the only thing I would compliment or add to that is, you know, I one of the things that I think need to change in the next 3 to 5 years is, number one, I think the OEMs should start becoming a little bit more sensitive to delivery dates. I was talking to one of those companies that you referenced earlier, the ones that don't seem to ever have problems. And then one of their problem is getting time commitments from the OEMs. I think that needs to change. And then the second one that needs to change, I think we need to do a better job collectively to understand how much supply there is in the market. Because I go back to a conversation I had with some OEMs years ago where they thought they had the corner market, and they were pleasantly displeased or unpleasantly displeased with how much the aftermarket actually contained. And I think we can do a better job with communication at getting those two things to come towards the middle. So before we wrap up, go ahead.
Sorry, I think the OEMs are trying to do that, but I think that there's complexities within that. You know,
Correct.
they don't deal with everyone. That's the reality. You know,
Correct.
they deal with their specific customers that have registered on their system, and a lot of the time that takes money and effort that some people just don't have the capacity to do.
Agreed.
So first of all, 100% agree on the timelines, but I do think that they're trying to be better at servicing the market as a whole. And
They
I
are.
think that, you know, some have gone the route of we don't deal with brokers, you know, and
Yep.
others have gone that route and are turning around and coming back
And
to
going back
brokers.
towards it. Correct.
Exactly. So I think
Correct.
that there's a space for everyone, and I 100% agree with you. MROs, OEMs
Correct.
need to be, you know, that honesty thing needs to be real. If you're going to say
100%.
60, if you're going to say 60 days, be 60 days, not 120 days. You know, if it's going to be 120 days, just
tell
us.
me. Correct.
Exactly.
Correct.
And I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed as well.
You hit the nail on the head. As long as we can progressively get better, I think we're in the right place. Last question for you. If you could run one aviation deal anywhere in the world, where is it and why?
Oh man, I love Central America. We spent some time in Costa Rica. I think it's such a beautiful part of the world, and I would love to have an excuse to go there, to a deal and stay for a month on holiday.
That would be
So,
awesome.
yeah, you know, so that would be a kind of selfish choice, but in reality, you know, we don't have the luxury of choosing where we do deals. You know,
I know.
at the end of the day, we've got to work wherever it is, you know, whether it be Nigeria, where you always run the risks that you run in Nigeria, or whether it's in the States where there are other risks. So, you know, that's the reality. I would love to spend time in Central America because I love it there, but you know, in fact, anywhere in South America is also pretty cool.
Absolutely. You know, last comment, I was talking to somebody that we both know a couple of days ago, and they made me aware of this show that has the actor Ewan McGregor and his buddy taking a bike up from Patagonia all the way up to Canada that I've never seen before, that I'm looking very, very forward to starting to watch because I think that's
They've
awesome.
done it twice.
They have done it. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they've done it twice. They did it once on you know, combustion engines.
Uh-huh.
And then they did it once
On e-bikes. That's right. That's right. E-bikes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can't wait to check that out. First of all, I like him as an actor, but I think that's a great journey. So I can't wait to look at it.
watch
So
it. It's a really great show.
I will. John, thank you so much for coming on with me and taking the time to answer some of my questions and honestly having a conversation about life. Everybody else, I hope you get to know John Howe from Valerex Aviation. The name should be on his background. Look him up on LinkedIn. You said the website was valerexaviation.com. Check it out.
Yeah.
If you do nothing but talk to him, I think you'd be better off. So, and if
And
anything, you again.
if anyone wanted to call me, they can call me on my cell or on WhatsApp at +27 71 987 1996, which is on the website.
Awesome. Awesome. I was going to ask you that anyway. You read my mind. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us. John, you have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me, Ralph. I appreciate it. And thanks for the time.
You got it. Bye-bye. Hold on.